This was a fun project to do, and I get so many compliments on my fence because it stands out so much more than your typical vertical fence. So why not go horizontal? I'm going to show you how, and I did it in probably the most affordable way that you can do a fence like this. We are on the other side of the fence because this fence separates two rental properties that I have, so two backyards. So your first question is, where do you put the support posts? This fence is attached to a block wall on this side and the house on this side. Each scenario is going to be different. The spacing is what you're going to want to nail to get the most aesthetic look. You're going to want the spacing in between each of the boards to be as even as possible. I would probably range in between 6 and 8 feet. So the longer the board, the more you're going to be playing with it to try to get these boards to have this even gap here. So I basically set up a string line, don't overthink it. Super easy to make sure that the fence was relatively straight. And then I just marked where my holes were going to be and I dug them. Now I would go at least 2 feet if your ground is pretty hard. And if your ground is really soft and you're worried about it, just go 3 feet. To secure the posts, we're going to be using cement. If you don't have a cement mixer, don't worry about it. Just use a wheelbarrow. It's really not too hard. It takes a little bit longer, a little bit more manpower, but unless you guys are doing like 40 posts, a wheelbarrow is just fine. So I got a little ahead of myself. Let's go over everything that you need. You need 4x4s. Now pressure treated is the best. I went with the Douglas fir just because it's cheaper and I live in Arizona. Yeah, you guys can get 8-footers, 10-footers, but remember to subtract the wood that's in the ground. So if you guys get an 8-foot post and you dig 3 feet, you only have it sticking up 5 feet. Most of you are probably going to want the 10-foot 4x4. So for the boards along the fence, I went with a 1x6. I got a common board here, which is pine. It's going to be a lot cheaper than cedar, about half the price. And these cuts with the rough edge, these have more surface area, which will hold more stain or paint. And these are the exact screws that I use. These are GRK fasteners, 1 5/8. And these are designed not to crack your wood, so you don't have to pre-drill. That's going to take way too long. So if you can find these ones, I'd recommend them, but any screws will work. It's not a big deal if you crack your wood a little bit because we're going to have trim pieces covering up the seams. You'll need some cement. Just grab the most common one you see. Don't overthink it. So once the holes are all dug, I like to put a shovel full of gravel in there for drainage. And then I also like to paint the bottom of my 4x4s with Kilz. It's a primer that's anti-mold, anti-rot. I don't know if it does anything, but it definitely can't hurt. So then I set the post in there. I get some scrap wood. I make it secure. Then I get a post level, get it as level as I can. Then I start putting the cement in. Now it's going to move around a little bit. Just keep adjusting it. And then once it's full of cement, make your final adjustment, and it takes 24 hours for it to cure. Once that's all done, you can start installing your boards. Now start from the bottom up, and you want to get that bottom board perfectly level. But a thing to remember is you don't want any of the bottom board touching the ground. That's going to rot that board faster than a Ryobi tool breaking. So you find your highest point on the ground, you go up about a 1/2 inch, and that's the lowest you can go throughout the whole fence. So the gaps on the bottom isn't going to be perfect, just like this one, but the rest of the fence is going to look flush, it's going to look beautiful, and you're definitely going to be glad that no part of the fence is touching the ground. So from here, it's pretty self-explanatory. Cut the boards where they meet in the middle of the 4x4. Oh, and this gap right here, all I did was I cut a little piece off of the 1x6, and I used the thickness of the wood to make the gaps here. I like to go about 4 rows up, and then I move on to the next panel just to make sure everything's lining up really good and flush. Oh, and if you want this exact look, a lot of you are gonna go the extra mile, paint these 4x4s black. I didn't do it on this side, and you can't really tell too much, but it looks a lot better on the other side. I used Australian timber oil, the color teak for this side, and if you notice, the other side is different, and I just used their natural color. I actually made a video on why I went with the Australia timber oil, but these trim pieces are painted in my favorite black, which is iron ore. Just like whites, there's so many different blacks, and just trust me, iron ore looks really, really good, especially in sunny climates like this. But on this side, I used some wood filler here over the screws, and then I painted it. I wouldn't do that. All I would do is screw it in and then just put one more coat over it and cover those screws up with paint. It's a lot easier, and if you ever have to take a trim piece off, it's gonna be much easier. It's just not worth the hassle. 3 coats of the iron ore on these trim pieces. You ever have a horizontal fence like this, and over time, these gaps get a little wonky? That's because as these boards dry, they tend to want to warp. But you can help prevent that by putting a support 2x4 in between your support posts here. So in between the 4x4s, just measure the distance in half and throw a 2x4 in the back here. And this makes all the difference. I don't think I invented this, and there's much better ways to do this. But all I did was I stapled landscaping fabric, and it looks great. I'm just curious to see how long this will last. So it's kind of breathable, which is cool. Wind can kind of go in and out. And since I live in Arizona and I don't get much rain, I'm thinking it'll last a long time. But yeah, this is just an easy, fun, and cheap way, kind of how I like my women.
Hell yes.
But here's the problem with this scenario. So this separates two properties. So basically I had to do two sides of the fence here. Now what happens if this is starting to malfunction back here? What do? Do I have to take off panels and fix it or whatever? So it's gonna be a big pain in the butt. If you guys are just doing a fence where one side has to look really clean, this would be a really good option for you, because if anything's going on with the landscaping fabric, you could just take it off and redo it. Or anywhere where it's gonna be raining a lot or snowy climates, I wouldn't recommend it. I know this project can look a little bit intimidating for some of you, but give it a shot, guys. Worst case scenario, you mess it up, it's a funny story, and you learn a ton along the way. And that's what life's all about, is doing things that you're afraid of. So give it a shot. I hope you liked the video. If you did, give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and see you guys next time.